Hey everyone, I see that a couple of you have already joined. So welcome to the session, people. Can you just let me know if you guys can hear me? If you can, please mention a yes in the chat section. Okay, perfect. What about the others? Great, perfect. Okay, so we're anyway going to get started with the session right away. I'm not going to wait any further. Anyway, since this is a live recording, in case people are not able to join today, they can still view this particular session at some other point later. Um, Cool then. So let's get started. So first of all, thank you so much, people, for actually joining this particular session. Really means a lot that you showed that confidence in us to actually pay for the session and attend the session as well. So thank you so much, people. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Rahul. I'm the co-founder of Vidya. I've been a data science buff for quite some time now. Primarily been focusing on data science for over 2 years now. uh, I mean, data science, machine learning, and deep learning to be more precise. I have a couple of research papers published on my name where I've been the primary author, the first author as well. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I've done quite a few internships. I've helped a couple of other companies on a consulting basis where I've helped them build their data science strategies and help them figure out a proper pipeline to follow. So that's about me. So I mean, if you're wondering whether I have the experience to actually teach you or not, trust me, I I do because I mean I've taken these sessions in the past as well. I've mentored over 150 people with respect to data science alone, and a lot of them have been placed in really good startups now with a pretty decent package. So yeah, I mean I do know what I'm going to be talking about. So feel rest assured. Um, in case you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask them. Okay, but just make sure that whenever you have a question, you put it down in the comments in the live chat. I might not be seeing these comments right away, or I mean the chats right away, because I would be explaining the projects and explaining various aspects. So even if I don't worry. Towards the end of the session, we have an allocated time for just the Q&A part, where I'll ensure that I answer your questions. So whenever you have any questions, please feel free to put them up on the live chat, and I'll be answering them towards the end of the session. So that's point number one. So point number two, let's come into the session itself. So we'll be dealing with data science, as you already know, right? So how many of you here actually know what data science is? I mean, how many of you have probably done a project or something related to data science? If you have, please mention a yes in the chat section. And in case you haven't, please mention no, or anything is fine. I just want to get a brief understanding of the audience over here, so that accordingly I can cater my content as well. Okay, so I do see some people who have done a couple of projects and some people who haven't, which is great. I mean, no issues at all, because either way we'll be dealing with a couple of things in today's session and in the upcoming sessions as well. So no issues with that. Um, Great then. Okay, so thing about data science, before we even delve into today's topic, let me just give you a brief understanding of what data science is. Uh, So basically, let's take an example first. So how many of you here use Snapchat, or how many of you have used Snapchat at some point in time? If you have, please mention an I have in the chat section. Okay, great. Okay, so some of you have used, some of you haven't. No issues with that. Um, okay, so basically, Snapchat is this particular app where you can just send a particular message, and you can set a timer on that, and and then it disappears. Okay, and I mean they also have something called stories and things like that, similar to that you see on WhatsApp or Instagram. Initially, it came out on Snapchat, and eventually, other companies started copying it because it was a pretty good strategy. So now over here, the thing was that initially Snapchat was an amazing, app. People really loved using it, and obviously, as a company grows, you tend to make some changes, right, with respect to the user experience, the user interface, things like that. So there was this one point in time where Snapchat, they decided to change the layout of the entire app. So previously it was more of having a particular section. I mean the stories were the layout for the stories was different as compared to how it started looking in the new update. And because of that particular reason, people started dropping. I mean, like, people stopped using Snapchat. I mean, yeah, I mean, see, over here, this was something that was not really expected, because obviously the company was looking at making the experience more smoother for people. It's just that people weren't ready to accept it. Eventually, Snapchat had to get, bring this change down. I mean, bring this change, revert this particular change, and stick to what they initially had. And that is because obviously your customers do determine what you're doing, right? You need to make sure that your customers are always happy. The people using your product are always happy. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because now, had Snapchat not realized that drop in numbers, right? Had they not realized that their active users are dropping drastically on a daily basis, they might never have reverted back to their original change. Okay, I mean, they wouldn't have really got back to their original product again. They must have stuck with their new update, and probably they must have lost even more users. So they had to do some damage control over here, and their basis for damage control was the data backing it. So you have so many such decisions in every company, literally, which are backed by data. Okay, I mean, every company, like, say Facebook, Google, Instagram, Snapchat, every company out there, they obviously understand how many users are there. They try to understand changes, and they try to understand the effect of those changes, and they try to understand how the user is using a product. So it's all about the data out there, right? So the analysis, the exploration, the predictive models, everything else is secondary. But then, number one aspect for data science, or for anything that's data driven, is your data. Okay, and you really need to make sure that you understand your data in a really intense manner. I mean, it's pretty much like having a girlfriend, okay, or a boyfriend, to be honest. It's more like a relationship that you're trying to build with data, right? Because the better you understand it, the better you'll actually be able to perform your analysis and all of that. So you need to make sure that you understand things. And I mean, I think that's pretty much one of the first rules of every relationship, right? You need to make sure that you understand things as well. So yeah, I mean, like, you need to understand things about your partner. You need to make sure that you understand things on a level that's different from others. And that's where data scientists come into play. I mean, obviously not with the relationship part, but the relationship with data, I mean. So these data scientists are essentially people who understand data better than most other people out there. And understanding data is not that easy, trust me. I mean, it takes a lot of efforts, it takes a lot of experience, it takes a lot of time as well. Okay, and you obviously need to try out so many things here and there to figure out what you should possibly be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and all of that. Having said that, it's one of the most interesting things to actually do, because I mean, yeah, understanding data is like giving you superpowers, right? I mean, superheroes obviously aren't a real concept, but then being able to analyze and understand that particular data that you have makes you feel like a superhero, because the decisions you put forward, I mean, the insights you bring forward might actually impact the lives of billions. Imagine working at a Google as a data scientist. Imagine working at a Facebook as a data scientist. These are products used by billions of people around the world on a daily basis. So obviously, I mean, Each of these products, I mean, being data scientists in each of these products and coming up with insights is obviously going to impact billions of lives. So yeah, I mean, if not truly a superhero, you are a superhero in some sense of it. So that's where data science is actually very interesting. It's all about building a relationship with data, understanding it in a better way than most others don't. um, it's obviously going to take time for people to get that feel, get that understanding about the data, but then once you do, trust me, it's going to be an amazing feeling. Okay, so coming to the session today, right, we won't be diving directly into exploring data because, as I mentioned, I mean, first, for doing any sort of exploration, we need to have data, right? So today we'll be dealing with data collection, which is one of the most important aspects of data science, because if you don't have data, you can't do anything, right? So you need to make sure that you have enough data on you, and that's where things are that's where that forms the basis of your analysis, in fact, right? So we'll be dealing with data collection today, a couple of methods related to data collection. And people, let me tell you, this particular session, obviously, I mean, like, it's not easy to go from beginner to advanced in data science just in a span of 5 days, right? This particular session is more about covering the entire pipeline, right? We're going to be covering A to Z of the pipeline, but the efforts you put in will determine where you stand eventually, right? So I mean, obviously, right, it's pretty much the case in everything. So you need to make sure that you put in efforts, you work, you practice, you do some projects here and there, and figure things out as well, right? So what we teach you here, obviously, I mean, how much can you teach in 10 hours, right? We're going to be dealing as much as we can, but there's obviously going to be much more. Okay, so I would request you people to explore more on a particular topic that's being taught on a daily basis, and even after the workshop is done, make sure that you keep practicing things and you keep learning things. We'll also be sharing a lot of material towards the end of the 5-day workshop. We'll be sharing a couple of PDFs, presentations related to big data, machine learning, and deep learning as well. The NLP part, the natural language processing part, computer vision, things like that. Just make sure that you have things at one place to actually go through at any point in time of your life. So we'll be dealing with a lot of things, but in this particular webinar, obviously, I mean, we might not really be dealing in depth with various aspects. We will be dealing with the essentially aspects related to the data collection, as the data collection part, the exploratory data analysis part, the predictive modeling part, quantitative modeling part, and finally, if time permits, then we will also be looking at certain aspects of natural language processing. uh, I'm looking at having 2 sessions with respect to exploratory data analysis alone, because after having data, it's really necessary for people to explore your data and understand it. As I mentioned, it's about building a relationship with data, and the only way to do that is by doing some exploration on your data. So I'm looking at having 2 particular days, like separately, for just exploratory data analysis, one day for predictive modeling, and finally one day for quantitative modeling. Uh, Predictive modeling essentially means using some machine learning algorithms or deep learning algorithms, and quantitative modeling is more about the mathematical aspect of it, right? So we'll also be looking into a couple of machine learning algorithms with respect to the math involved, if possible. And we'll also be looking at how to build your own predictive models purely by using a few mathematical equations. So that's basically how the schedule is for the next for the next 5 days. Um, so I do see a couple of questions over here. Will we have any projects to do? Um, Amina, so yes, there will be a couple of projects. I mean, it's so we will ask you to do a few projects on Vidya's platform itself, which will help you understand things in a better manner after a particular concept is done. But you won't have projects or assignments every day. However, even during the workshop, we will be explaining things to you through projects. So once the workshop is done, we'll also be sharing the codes for these particular projects with you so that you can go through them at your leisure. So yeah, I mean, the sessions will be taken up through a project based manner, and apart from that we will also give you a few take home assignments which you could do if you wish and if you have time. And Shaunak, apart from Python and Jupyter, see, honestly, if you have Python, it's all about just installing the necessary modules. So I'm not sure if you went through the email that I sent yesterday regarding the session being postponed to today. And apart from that, I also mentioned a list of things you possibly should be downloading. That I mentioned that we will require NumPy, Pandas, Keras, sorry, NumPy, Pandas, Scikit-learn. Keras would definitely help as well. But yeah, I mean, don't worry about that, because if there's anything that's required, I'll be mentioning it over the due course of time. So yes, if you have Python, I think that should be more than enough for now. Okay, cool. So okay, so let's get started right away. So as I mentioned, the topic that we'll be dealing with today is data collection. So you have different ways to actually collect data. Number one, it's really simple, right? You can just download a data set from the internet. Probably just do a Google data set search, look for a data set that matches your requirements or needs, and just download it, right? But the problem here is that you're not always going to find data set with respect to what you want. Okay, I mean, the data that you have on the internet is not always going to satisfy your requirements. So there are going to be times where you will have to create your own data set, right? So in such cases, you have different aspects, like you could possibly use an API that has this particular data, or you could do some web scraping to get data from different websites, things like that. But sometimes what might happen is that you might have data in your database itself, and you'll have to probably perform some MySQL queries or a NoSQL query, something like that, and just extract the data from your databases, right? So today's session, the first aspect that we'll be dealing with is extracting data through APIs. So what exactly are APIs and all of that? I'll just be explaining them in brief. And once we're done with that, we will move on to web scraping. Okay. So these are the two methods that we'll be covering in today's session. First part is extracting data through APIs, and the second part is extracting data from various websites through web scraping. So I'll be sharing my screen with you people. So if you can view my screen, please mention a yes in the chat section. People, can you view my screen? If you can, please mention a yes in the chat section so that I know that you're able to see my screen. Okay, great, perfect. Cool. So let's get started. So the first aspect that we'll be dealing with is extracting stock prices, data of stock prices from this particular API in Python called quandl. Okay, so if you notice, this is the name of the API, quandl. Okay, so I'll be going through the code itself. It's a fairly easy code to actually go through, so no issues with that. So the first part is to import pandas. So pandas is this really important module in Python itself when you're dealing with data. So pandas is a module or a library which has functions related to data manipulation. Okay, so sorry about that. Yeah, so it basically has functions related to data manipulation, and it essentially helps you with respect to deciphering data in the format that you want. In the sense, so your data set's usually there in the form of an Excel sheet or a CSV file, or it could be a TSV file and things like that. CSV stands for comma separated values, and TSV stands for tab separated values. So it could be one of these things. Okay, and pandas actually helps you read these particular files and stores data in a a data type, or you could call it a data structure itself, called data frames. Okay, so what are these data frames? These data frames are nothing but, your a variable or something in which your data set is stored. Okay, things will get clear as we go through the code itself, so don't worry about that. So we import pandas as PD. As PD is basically, it's more like, an alias that we're giving to pandas. Instead of writing the whole word pandas every time we use it, we'd be using PD, just because it's much simpler, right? It's shorter and simpler to use. So yeah, and then from pandas we also import two specific classes called Excel writer and Excel file. This is because, in case we want to read an Excel file, then we will require these particular classes or functions as well. So Quandel is the library that I was talking about. This particular Quandel module is basically an API, and Quandel is basically an API, and this Quandel module that you see here is a wrapper class. So a wrapper class is basically built around an API to make things easier in a particular programming language. So in Python, you have a Quandel API as well, which is, a Quandel wrapper class API, which we will be using in this particular case to get our data. So yeah, so with respect to so Quandel, even so whenever you're looking at using APIs, one thing you need to make sure of is getting an API key. So if you notice over here, we have something called an API key, right? So you will not be able to access this particular Quandel module without getting this API key. And getting this API key is usually very easy. All you'll have to do is go to the particular website and create an API key. They might ask you to, sign up or log in, and once you do that, you will be able to generate an API key for yourself. So this particular API key is, for my, it's basically for specific to my particular account. So you can definitely generate your own keys as well. So let's just keep this as, a variable for now. Okay. Cool. So moving on. So we'll be dealing with data in the Bombay Stock Exchange, the BSE basically, and we'll be dealing with a couple of stocks from the Nifty 50. Okay, so we already have a list of these Nifty 50 stocks over here in the CSV file called nifty50.csv. If you notice over here, so we have the company name, the industry, symbol, series, and ISIN code. So honestly, for us in this particular case, none of these things matter. Okay, we don't care about the series, the ISIN number, the industry, or the company name. All that we care about is the symbol. Okay, so we will be using only this particular symbol to get data of stock prices from the Quandel module. Okay, the reason we're using this symbol is because every company has a unique identifier within the Bombay Stock Exchange. That's how you are able to that's how you're able to distinguish between different companies, right? So we'll be using this unique identifier to get data of that particular company's stock prices. Okay, so the first step I do is I use this function called read_csv to read my CSV file nifty50.csv. Okay, so if you notice, I put a pd.read_csv because this read_csv function is within the pandas module. Okay, so this read_csv function is basically a function which is used to read CSV files. Just as the name suggests, right? So that's exactly what it is. It's literally as simple as that. So we read the CSV file first. And now, if you remember, I mentioned that within the CSV file, the only column that makes sense for us is this particular column symbol, right? So basically, we are only cared with we only care about these particular values, that is Adani Ports or Asian Paint, Axis Bank, Bajaj-Auto, BAJ Finance, Bajaj Finserv, things like that, right? So we are only we only care about these particular symbols over here. Okay, that's all that matter to us right now. So that's the reason what we're doing is that now that so if you notice, we've read the CSV file and we've stored it in a particular variable called nifty_list. is just a variable. You can, give your own names to a particular variable. So over here, we just name this particular variable as nifty underscore list. So now that we have the entire data set stored in this, if as I mentioned, we want only the symbol information, right? So what we do is, using this particular variable in which we stored the data set, we extract only the column symbol. If you So how you can do that is, you just call that variable, reference that variable, and within square brackets mention the name of the column for which you want to extract information about, and then we convert it to a list. So list in Python basically is like an array. In other languages, for example, in C or C++, a few people have used these languages. You have an array, but then thing about these arrays is that you can only store one type of data, right? Whereas in Python, you can store any n number of data types within the same particular list. So I mean, it's just that, it gives you a sense. I hope it just gives you an intuition of what exactly lists are. So lists are basically very simple data structures. You could possibly call them one of the simplest data structures that you have in Python. But yeah, I mean, it's much more than that, right? So yeah, it's just, to give you an intuition on things. So yeah, so we just converted to a list for making it easier for us to read through this particular symbols. So once we do that, what's going to happen is that this entire column, Adani Ports, Asian Paint, Axis Bank, Bajaj Auto, etc., are all going to be stored in a particular list. So all that's going to happen, we're just going to have this particular information, like the symbols of every stock. And we're not going to have any other information like, the company name, the industry. None of that is going to be present. The only thing that will be present in this particular variable, company underscore codes, is this particular column, the symbol column within our nifty50.csv file. Okay, so we take that up, we store it in a variable called company underscore codes. And obviously, I mean, now in company underscore codes, you have about 50 stocks, right? Because the first row over here is a header. So apart from that, it goes on until 51 rows. So essentially, you have 50 rows of data, right? So which means that you will have 50 symbols, right? So yeah, so basically, you're going to have 50 different companies codes within this company codes list, or the variable that we have over here. So what we'll be doing is, ideally, we want to get information about each and every company's stock prices within this particular company codes variable, right? So essentially, it means that we want stock prices related to about 50 stocks, right? So what we do is, we iterate through that particular list. So what does iterate mean? So iterate means, like, for example, let's assume you have, so list is denoted within square brackets. Okay, so let's say you have 4 elements or 5 elements in the list: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, call this list as A. Okay, so okay, let's just make things simpler. So now I want to access each and every element in this particular list. Sorry. So what I do is, I would simply iterate through it. So iterating through it essentially means that you're going through each and every element in that particular list, one after another. Okay. So let's say, for element in A, print element. So ideally, what this shows is that, for so this particular element is basically a variable. So I mean, you can give it any name over here. So if you can also say, for x in A, print x, but then whatever name you use here, make sure that you use the same name over here as well. So yeah, I mean, so this is totally up to your choice, and so is the name of this particular variable. I've just taken it for the sake of it right now, just to help you understand what lists are and what iteration is. So yeah, so as I mentioned, what we're doing is, within this particular list A, we are going through every element and we are printing each of those elements, okay, one after the other. And if you notice, that's exactly what's happening, right? So first, within the list, once you enter the list, you encounter the value 1 and we print that value. Then you go to the next value, okay, you encounter 2, you print that value again, again, and again. So that's what we see over here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So similarly over here, what we're doing is, instead of iterating through numbers, we are iterating through something called strings. The reason, what are strings? Strings are nothing but, a set of characters, right? So let's say, um, B is equal to Rahul. So what this means, so this particular B, if you notice, let's say I say type of B, it says string. So it's basically a string. So string is nothing but a set of characters, right? So here in this particular company underscore codes list, we have, it's basically a list of it's a list of strings. Okay. So list of strings essentially means that, you have various things like this. Let's call something like this. Let's say ABC is one string, BCD is another string, and CDE is another string. So you have 3 strings over here and enclosed within a list. So this ideally so this is, similar to this is what we call a list of strings. Okay. So in company underscore codes as well, you have a list of strings, just that over here in this particular case, our strings are nothing but the symbols of the stocks we want to get the data for. So we just iterate through this particular company codes list, and then what we see is that we want so we ideally, if you notice, we're iterating through every company in company underscore codes, right? So what that means is that every company is so let me just give you an iteration over here. So let's say for LM and C, print C. Oh, I'm sorry. Should have been for LM and C, print LM. Right? So you have A, B, C, B, C, D, and C, D, E. So similarly, in every iteration, you get a particular company's company code over here. Okay. What we are doing is we are concatenating it with another string called NSE slash. The reason we have to do this is because for Quandel to get a particular stock's price, we need to make sure that we give it some context as to which particular stock exchange it belongs to. So in this case, it belongs to the NSE or the Bombay Stock Exchange. So that's why we're mentioning NSE over here. So NSE slash, and so this is one string, right? And the plus operator, what it does is that if you have 2 strings, it concatenates them. So for example, let's say we have a string, in a variable called this as Axis Bank. Okay. And then I say NSE, let's say I define another variable called NSE slash plus A. So this is basically like, what we see over here behind the screen. So we have an NSE slash plus company. So over here in place of company, we're just mentioning it as A because it's a variable name. Okay. So now let's see what B stores. So B basically stores NSE slash Axis Bank. So what it essentially did is that it just combined these 2 strings, right? So that's what this plus operator does. It's basically, so when you combine 2 strings together with a plus operator, you call it concatenation. Okay. So yeah, so we just say that get this particular company stock data, which belongs to the NSE, the National Stock Exchange. Okay. And then what we do is we use this Quandel library. Okay. Within Quandel, we have a function called get. So we say quandel.get of the stock, because we store this particular stock, whatever stocks information we want, we store it in a variable called stock. So we say quandel.get of stock, comma API key. So this API key will be a key that you get from your particular system, right? So yeah, I mean, this is something that you get from your account. So you'll have to log in and get your own API key. So I'm just going to make it as var over here. So you'll just have to fill this particular spot with your own API key. Okay. So once we get that data, So this particular data is, that we get is in the form of a data frame itself. Okay. So when it's in the form of a data frame, it makes things really simple for us, because what we can do is we can convert it to a CSV file much more easily. Okay. So ideally the idea is to, get every stock's data and store it in a separate CSV file within a folder called data sets. So what we're doing is, within datasets, we have numerous files going by the name historic data underscore, the name of the company, or basically the company code. Okay, over here, the company symbol dot CSV. Okay, so if you notice this datasets folder over here, this is how the stock prices are stored over here. Okay, so that's what this does. So essentially, what it does is, if so, let's just go into one of these stocks over here. So if you notice, it's pretty much like a CSV file, like every other CSV file. So you have a header row, and then you have data from the very beginning of that particular stock, and then you have various information about that particular stock, like the opening price on that particular day, the high price, the low price, the last price, the closing price, total trade quantity, and the turnover in lakhs. So you have a lot of information that you get from Quandel. So all of this is gotten directly from Quandel. So this whole information that we get is just through this one particular statement over here. Okay. All that we're doing is we're just converting it into a CSV file for our ease of usage. Okay. So yeah, that's basically what it is. So you we just simply do that, and we have our data over here. That's pretty much it. So that's basically one method of getting your data. So this is how simple it is to use an API to extract data, okay, and create your own data sets. So this is as simple as it is, and there's no more complication in that. Dealing with APIs is probably one of the most easiest things. So whenever you're looking at getting data, creating your own data set, I mean, if you're not able to find a suitable data set for your purposes on the internet, if you're creating your own data set, first make sure that you understand what sort of data you want. Okay. And try to go through the internet and see if there's any API or a wrapper class that gives you that particular data, because I mean, it's really simple to find documentation on these modules or wrapper classes, and it's really easy to use them, right? So all I had to do was use this one particular line where I get the entire data of stock prices. Everything else is basically just prepping up my system, right? I mean, I'm just prepping up my code to automate the whole process. Otherwise, I mean, I don't even need to have all of these things. So having just, if I want to do the grunt work, what I could have done is, I could have probably just had a statement, like I could have just had this one line of code, okay, to get the data. And it could have possibly been something like this: historic underscore data equal to quandel.get of NSE slash Axis Bank. Okay. And I enter the API key over here. Okay. And then again, for the next over here, since I've not imported Quandel, I'm getting this particular error. Okay. Now, same thing, if I want for the next talk, what I could have done is I could have said, NSE slash Adani ports, comma, API key equal to the API key that I have. So I could have done the grunt work if I wanted. It's just that I wanted to, make things simpler for myself over here, right? So that's the reason why I chose to automate the whole process. So in this case, I don't need to, do that grunt work of, the changing of the names right over here, because we are already getting the company codes from iterating through this particular list of company codes. So it just makes the thing easier for us. So we just store that thing in a particular CSV file, and then we're done. So it's really simple to use these APIs. So I suggest you to first make sure that you have you go through various APIs and figure out if that API satisfies satisfies your requirements, if it gives you the data that you're looking for. So that's one thing. Okay, so I see a couple of questions over here. So Rishikesh was asking me which editor I use. So I use Atom. If you see here, I use Atom. So it's just a text editor. It just makes things simpler for me, and I use my terminal to run my codes. Uh, so Shaunak, okay, how did I get this CSV? I'm assuming you're talking about the Nifty 50 CSV, right? So I got the CSV from the web itself. So I just searched on the internet saying list of Nifty 50 stocks, and I found the CSV on the internet. Uh, Please provide us with the data sets, Pavan. Yes, I will be providing you with the data sets. So don't worry about that. All the entire code base will be shared with you along with the data sets once the workshop is done. Shaunak, yeah, what's your question? I mean, if it was a previous question that I answered, great. If you have any other question, please feel free to put them out. Um, Sachin, let me just check. Oh, okay. I mean, this is just to understand if I'm getting 50 stocks or not. It's just more like a variable to keep a track of the number of company stocks that I'm getting. So yeah, I mean, it's just a variable over there. Shaunak, sure. I mean, see, the try except section is it's more about error handling. Okay. Uh, so this try except section, what it does is that in case I encounter any error over here, right? What happens is that instead of directly stopping my program, I divert it to an except section, okay, where my program just continues for the other company codes. So it's just basically for error handling over here. So I just put in the main code context within my try block because that's exactly what I always want to do. But if by chance I encounter some unexpected error, I print that particular company's company code, try to understand what that error is later, but I don't want my program to get disrupted. So I keep the flow of my program going. So yeah, I mean, I just make sure that the program continues and does not stop abruptly. So that's basically what the try except block does. Is just for error handling over there. So I guess that answers your question. Uh, okay. Okay, perfect, Sachin. Glad that you got it. Perfect. Okay, so we are done with one part of our agenda for today. Moving on to the next part. This is going to be pretty interesting because I personally started coding, and this was my area of interest. I mean, like this is what kind of got me to start coding because I found this fascinating and interesting. So I hope you find it interesting too. But yes, it I mean I mentioned that we'll be dealing with something interesting today in the email. I might be wrong. Some of you might find it boring, but it is really necessary for all of us as data scientists to know how to generate our own data sets. And we'll be dealing with something that might seem boring and interesting at the same time, and that's called web scraping. Um, so yeah, here we are. We'll be starting with web scraping. So okay, so let's get started. So so what is web scraping, right? So every website, if you notice, let's just go here, right? So every website, if you notice, has a particular um, code that we write on it, right? Basically, we write HTML, CSS code to just to make sure that the people using the website can see something on it, right? So the your entire website is usually a set of HTML, CSS codes, and web scraping. What it does is that it helps you parse this HTML codes and get information out of it. So let's assume that within this particular page, rather than me going onto this particular page and manually taking out information about the constituency a particular person is from, and the party that a particular politician is from, the name of that particular politician, which is given over here, or over here as well, right? Their email address, their phone number. Instead of doing manual work to actually get all of this information, what is easier for me would probably be to run a script, right? Write a script and run that particular script, run that particular Python script. It just makes things easier, right? I mean, why do I need to do all the grunt work all the time? And sometimes it might not be really scalable because you might have many such pages that you might want to go through. So it's not practically possible for you to go to each and every link. So it's one page. Okay, fine, cool. I can do it for one page probably manually, but then assume you have thousands of pages like these. So it's practically going to get really difficult for you to go through each of this, right? So it just makes things really difficult. So we just make sure that we sorry, so we just make sure that we write a script for that and automate the whole process. And that's where web scraping comes into place. As the name suggests, it's basically scraping the websites to get the information that you want. Okay, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure you all will also get a better feel of it once we go through this particular thing. So in this particular code, what we'll be dealing with is we'll be dealing with I'm sorry. So we'll be dealing with getting data of politicians from a particular state. Okay. So we'll be using this particular website called nocorruption.in. So what if you notice? I'm sorry. This is the website that we'll be using, and it has a list of states for which you can get data for. And let's just stick to one particular state, which is, let's say, Karnataka. So I get redirected to this particular link. Okay. So similarly, let's say I want to check Telangana. Okay. So over here initially I had Karnataka. So I'll just replace Karnataka with Telangana and let's see if we get the results or not. And we do. Okay. Similarly, let's say I use Rajasthan. I still do. I get a list of MPs and MLAs from Rajasthan. So, one thing that we've noticed is that this particular part remains same. Okay. And the only thing that changes is the state, right? So let's go back to Karnataka. Okay. Over here, I have things in a tabular format, right? So I have things in a tabular format over here. I have various politicians' names, the constituency they're from, their profession, their education, and the amount of assets that they have. And also on clicking on every politician's name, I am redirected to a particular page, right? With respect to that particular politician. So now over here, my first aim is to get these profiles because, okay, so let me clearly explain what the aim of this particular web scraping code is. The aim of this particular web scraping code is to get the name, to get the phone number, and to get the email ID, if available, of a particular politician from a particular state. Okay. So in this particular for this particular politician, we obviously have the name, as you can see, and then we have a phone number, but we do not have an email address. And also notice one very interesting thing over here. The email address is not text. So if you notice, I can copy the, I mean, I can highlight this, but I can't highlight this. I mean, I can't highlight it letter by letter, right? That's because this is an image, if you notice. Okay. So yeah, so if you notice, this is not text, but this is an image over here. Okay. So now how are we going to interpret images? That is secondary. We will be looking into that. But before that, the idea is to basically, get the name of every politician in a particular state, a phone number if available, and an email address if available. So even before we go to every politician, even before we go into this particular data, one thing that we notice is that we have information about politicians over here, right? I mean, on clicking on every politician's name, we are redirected to a page which contains their information. So our first aim is to scan this particular page and get those particular links and store them. Okay. And that is exactly what we're going to do. So, I mean, I've just modularized this particular code in a class. So class is just a way to, modularize your code and just to make it look prettier and all of that, to follow object-oriented programming concepts. So don't worry much about that. So I'll just give you a brief into it. So we have a class called politicians data. We define something called a constructor. A constructor is how you call your particular class. And we have a constructor which takes in one particular argument, which is called the state. Okay. The reason we're doing that is because if you, as I mentioned, I'm sorry, so sorry about that. As I mentioned, if you notice over here, this particular URL is the same for everything. It's just that the name of the state keeps changing, right? So I just want to make sure that I generalize my code rather than making it very rigid. So I just taken the state, okay, and I store it in a variable called self.state. I mean, the reason I'm storing it in a variable called self.state is because it's an it's a variable of the class. Okay, so I just want to have it as an variable of the class. So it's an instance variable, you could call it. Um, so yeah, I mean, what we're doing is we're storing that particular state in this particular variable self.state. Okay. Now that's basically a constructor. So it's really simple. A constructor function is very simple. So moving on, let's go to the first part, which is to get the get the state politicians profiles. Okay, what that means is, oh my god, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, so what that means is that getting this particular links attached to each and every user over here. Okay, so we're going to be getting each and every user's links over here. Okay, and yeah, I mean it's just going to help us with getting the data. Yeah. So the first aim is to get the links associated with every politician's profile. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. So coming back to the code, so we define a variable called URL. Okay, and we store this particular thing. So we concatenate two strings. State itself is a string, so that's why self.state also will be a string. So what we do is we have this particular, so this is constant everywhere, as we already saw, and we're just appending a self.state part to it, the name of the state basically. Okay, over here we have two really important modules that you need to know about when you're dealing with web scraping, and they are called beautiful soup and requests. Okay, BS4, or beautiful soup as we call it in short, and requests module. So what are requests? So every time you interact with a particular website, you type a URL. Okay, and when you type a URL and hit enter, you are sending a request from your end, right? So you're sending a request to access that particular website, and then whatever you see on the screen is basically a response. So for example, let's say facebook.com. I click enter now. I'm sending a request to Facebook servers. Okay, now Facebook is deciphering that request and giving me back a response, and this is what I see. Okay, so this is exactly what I see. This is the response that I get from Facebook. Okay, so everything on the internet is basically in the form of requests and responses. Okay, and yeah, so okay, yeah, thank you for mentioning that, people. I just realized that my Mac was off too. So just give me a moment. I'll get my charger. Just give me a moment. Not a huge fan of charging my laptop usually, but yeah, thank you for reminding me, people. Okay, so yeah, so as I was mentioning, yeah, everything on the internet is basically in the form of requests and responses. So you send a request to a website and you get a response back. So a Python module that helps you mimic what you're doing on the browser is called requests. Okay, so instead of going to a browser and sending a request, we are going to be mimicking sending a request from within a Python program. Okay, and that's what the requests module helps you with. So rather than you doing all the grunt work where you write some more code to just send requests and get a response and decipher it and all of that, we use request to just simply send a request and get that response back and store it. So when we so within the requests module, you have this function called get. Sorry about that. So you have this function called get, and this particular get function, what it does is, given an argument or a URL, it sends a request to that particular URL, gets a response back, and stores it in the variable that you assign it to. So over here, our URL has been defined as https:// no corruption .in /state plus self.state. So the self.state value will be, I mean, like the self.state will take a value that we initialize our class with. So you'll notice that later we have, defined a main block of code where we say that initialize a class of politicians data with the state name as Karnataka. So that's why the self.state name would be Karnataka in that place. But we'll get to that. Don't worry about that. So yeah, so we send a request to this particular URL, okay? And what we do is, now that we have a request, we've sent a request and got a response back, right? So we are storing that response in this particular variable R, okay? Yeah, so we're storing the response in a particular variable called R. This can be anything. So I can even call it RESP or RSP. I can call it anything. It's up to us, or it's up to you as a programmer. So you can choose to give this particular variable any name. In fact, all variables choose to give it any name of your choice. So yeah, we will be calling it R. Okay, so we store the response that we get from this particular URL in this variable R. Done now. Now that we have the response, right? The next task is to decipher that response. Okay, so what does deciphering a response mean? So sometimes what might happen is, when I say facebook.com slash, I just give some gibberish, let's say, okay? So Facebook is trying to scan that particular URL, but then it sends a response saying this page isn't available, right? So ideally, these companies, all of them have a particular way to handle responses. I mean, like send a response out. So either there is an proper response, or there is no response, or you might have a different response than you're expecting, and all of that. So now that we've stored that response over here, we need to decipher that response. Okay. To decipher that response, we use this module called BS4. Okay. So BS4 is basically a module which we use for deciphering your HTML responses that you get from your requests module. Okay. Within BS4, you have a class called Beautiful Soup. Okay, and that is exactly, I mean, that is precisely what we'll be using to get all the necessary information. Okay, so over here, I just call a variable called soup. I just define a variable called soup, and I say beautiful soup of, I mean, like beautiful soup, and I define two arguments within it. One is r.content, and the other one is html.parser. Okay, so what r.content does is, basically from this response that I have, I want only the content. So basically what we're saying is that, using beautiful soup, give me the content that is present in this particular response that we've got from this particular URL, but parse it in the HTML format. That's what we're saying. It's literally as simple as that. So you have different types of parsers. You have XHTML, you have XML parsers, you have different types of parsers, but over here we're using HTML parser because the code itself is in HTML format. Cool. So now we've got the content. Okay. So now this particular content, what's going to happen is that I'm going to get, so if I try to print out this thing called soup, what's going to happen is that, what's going to happen is that I'm just going to get the entire HTML code of that particular website. Okay. So if I say https:// no corruption.in /state /Karnataka, I'm just going to get the entire HTML code of this particular website over here. I'm just going to get the entire HTML code of this particular website over here. That's about it. That's how it is. So yeah, so That's what it does. So it just stores the entire HTML code in this particular thing called soup. Now, the idea is we want to get the links of those profiles, right? We want to get the links of every politician there. Okay. And how are we going to do that? That's the main question, right? So for that, what we do is we need to try to understand the HTML code itself first of all. Okay. So over here, sorry, let me just select this and let me inspect it. So you have something called inspect element in almost every browser, which helps you look at the HTML code. Okay. So in this particular case, if you notice, so just look at it progressively. Okay. So basically the data that we want is in this particular table over here, right? Yeah. So it's basically in this particular table out here. Um, and we want to get, these particular profiles of every politician up in that particular table. If you notice this particular class over here, so it's basically a division. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of basic HTML CSS concepts, but see, it's totally fine if you're not aware about it. Just you can have a look at it later. But yeah, I mean, just try to follow what I'm saying. Okay. So ideally, every HTML, every website, every web page is basically a combination of various codes, right? HTML and CSS, and you have a backend code and all of that. But what you see in front of you is basically the front end part, which is built using HTML and CSS very frequently. So over here, even in this case, they've used HTML and CSS to build this particular website. And within HTML files, you within a HTML file, you obviously have certain elements, right? So this is more like a heading. You have a table over here, and then you have multiple divisions in the website, right? So all of that is basically defined within your HTML code. And honestly, trust me, you do not need to know HTML a lot. Or in fact, I personally did not know HTML, CSS, and all of that when I started off with this particular web scraping aspect. All that I knew was how to inspect elements and how to understand the flow of elements within a particular thing. That's about it. So I just understood how to navigate through various divisions and all of that. And that kind of got me like, pretty accustomed and familiar with web scraping itself. So if you notice the entire data that want, right? The entire data that we want is within this particular division, because I mean, honestly, we don't really care about this particular heading, right? We want to obviously get this particular table, the data from this particular table, I mean, the politicians' profiles. But then before going into that, since it's way too nested in the sense it's inside, this particular div class, since it's inside that, I'm trying to first make sure that I make my, nesting a little more simpler for my purposes, for the ease of use. So yeah, so over here, if you notice, we have a div with a class name called span12, within which we have this particular table, right? So now let's try to just inspect this particular thing. Where exactly is this, right? So you have a table which has this particular class name, right? Within which you have various profiles, various people's names, and all of that. But now, if you notice, one interesting thing is that you also have, I mean, like, sorry. So when you go on to span 12, you will notice that, you have a list of, sorry, this is in the mobile mode. Anyway, you will notice that you have a list of politicians over here, right? And you want their links as well. So ideally, you want to extract these links. Okay. So what we'll be doing is first, we will get into this particular class called span12. Okay. So what we do is we say soup.find find this particular HTML code where the class is called span12. That's what it means. Okay. So essentially the soup is going to store your entire website's HTML code, and when you say give me within the soup, find me a class which has the class name span12. Okay, so what that does is basically it'll give you the HTML code only from here, because you're now shortening your code, right? We're just looking at making things easier for us. So going about it in a step-by-step manner. So within the soup, when I say I want, so let's just get back to this inspecting part. Yeah. So yes. So if you notice, we have span 12 over here. We also have a span 12 over here. So basically what it's going to do is, using the find function, is going to give you the HTML code of the entire website where the first span 12 is located. Okay. So that's the main idea over here. So we get the code from span 12 onwards. Now, once we have got that, we are storing it in a variable called table underscore box. Okay. Uh, So within table, so we are storing it in a variable called table underscore box, and using this table underscore box, we will be finding all the links that we want. Okay. So what I say is, now I want all the links on that particular website, right? Because that is what will give me the politicians' profiles links, right? So if you noticed, so I just click on that link. Sorry. So if I click on this particular link, I am taken to a particular politician's profile. So similarly, I want all the politicians' profiles over there. So for that, what I do is, yeah, so I just, make sure that I get all the links. Okay. And one thing to remember is that within HTML files, your links are referred to as A. Okay. So a tag that you use to create links within an HTML file is represented by the tag A. Okay. So let me just show you how it looks to make things simpler. Yeah. So over here, if you notice, we have a href equals to this, and then the text that we see, and then we close the tags. Okay. So this a is nothing but a tag which says that this particular text between which, I mean, this particular text between the a tags is going to be a text with link. Okay. And to what you're linking it is defined in href. Okay. So we basically want this particular information, right? So we want to get this href over here. That is exactly what we're looking for. So first, what we do is, first we find out all the links, find out all the links present in this particular table underscore box. Okay. We find, so how we do that is by saying table underscore box dot find all. Okay. So find all function basically stores stores the list of all the linked text and links that are present in this particular HTML part. Okay, and it stores it in a particular list of, it stores in a particular list, and you can assign a variable to it so that you can store it properly. So you can give anything over here. So you can, since over here we're looking at getting the links, we're using this particular A. In case you're looking at getting a particular division or particular section, you have different tags in HTML, right? So you have, if you notice, you have something called an h2 tag, you have a t head tag, you have a t body tag. So you have different tags in HTML. So you can use any of these tags and you can just mention it over here depending on your requirement. But over here, our requirement is to get the links associated with each and every politician's profile. So we'll be using the A tag, and we say href equals to true, because by default, when you don't mention this href equals to true, it just gets you the particular links and it does not store the href, or the link, that particular link that we're looking for. That's what is important to us, right? So we say href equals to true. Then what we're doing is, forget about all these parts. This is just about storing the data. We'll get to that in just a bit, but ideally, the most important part lies over here. Okay. Okay, so I see a couple of questions over here from Shaunak. Uh, So why did we pass class underscore? Because Shaunak, that's an argument within the find function. Find function is a function within the beautiful soup module, and it's not something that we can define. So this class underscore is an inbuilt argument. We are just setting that argument to span underscore 12. Find all is a function or method. It's pretty much the same, right? I mean, a function is a method, so it's pretty much the same thing. I hope that clears your question. If it does clear your question, can you please mention a yes? Or if you have any further follow-up questions, please put them out. Okay, great. Yeah, so Sachin, so as I was saying, basically this href equals to true part, as I was saying over here. See, the idea for us is not to just get the name, right? So if you remember the aim of this particular code, the aim of this particular code is to get the name, the phone number, and the email address of a particular politician within that particular state, right? But to get the phone number and the email address, I need to go into every politician's personal profile. So this particular politician has a particular link, and then um, going back, this particular politician has another link. I mean, okay, so I'm sorry, I just clicked on the same politician again, but yeah, I mean, every politician has a separate link, okay, and that's our main aim first. So we want to make sure that we get those links associated with each and every politician. And in HTML, the links, I mean, to link a particular text, we use the a tag, and where we link it to is stored in the href attribute. Okay, so this href is called an attribute. Okay, and this attribute is what stores this particular link. Okay, I mean, it tells you where exactly you want to redirect that person to what page. So over here, when we're saying table underscore box dot find all, we're saying find all a tags, and we're passing this href equals to true, because by default, if we don't mention this, we are not going to get these links that we want. We're not going to get these links. So it's necessary for us to make sure that we mention href equals to true, so that it also stores the links that we're looking for, because that is of utmost priority to us. So I hope that clears it. So in case you have any further questions, please feel free to put them up. I'll come back to them in just a bit. So yeah, moving on. So now what we need to do is, obviously, now when we say find all, if you noticed, all these politicians have a link, right? So all these politicians have a link associated with them. So the idea is to make sure that we get all the links associated over there, right? So when for that, and this particular links is a list of links, as I already mentioned. So the find all function returns a list of various it returns a list of all the a links, or all the links present within this particular table underscore box HTML part, which we narrowed down from the soup. So now I just iterate through the links list. Okay, and what I say is, so I've noticed that the name of the politician for me is stored as a text, right? So if you notice, this particular thing is a text, and the link to it is what I'm interested in, right? So when I say a dot text, it gives me the text associated with that particular link. Okay, and when I say a dot get of href, I get the link itself, and that is what I'm interested in, and that's what I'm going to be storing within a particular file. Okay, so here I'm going to be calling a file called self.state plus, I'm just concatenating the state name with an underscore links.txt file. So basically it's going to be like Karnataka underscore links.txt, and I'm opening it in the write mode. So I'm just opening a normal file over here to store these particular links, just to automate that process. Okay, So I've got this particular politician links. Okay, I'm just storing it in a list. So I mean, instead of, so what I can do is I can, just store all those links and all of that. But then instead of that, I just want to make sure that all the links are, being stored one after the other. So when I'm storing things in a file, let's say, okay, just give me a moment. Let's state politicians profiles. Okay, so basically when I store things in a file, right, what's going to happen is that I want, a particular person's information to be stored in one particular row. Okay, the next person's information in the next row, the person after that's information in the next row. So for that, I need to make sure that I give a um, proper way to, say that go to the next line. So for that, I include this /n character as well. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm getting the profiles part, okay, profiles of every politician, and then I'm just giving a /n so that I tell my file go to the next line when you're writing the next thing. So it's just as simple. It's just for me to make sure that I do that. It just makes things easier. And then what I do is I say f dot close. So basically, I'm just closing this file pointer that I opened initially. So that's how we get the links, and that's what makes it really easy to get the links as well. And then what I'm doing is now I the thing over here is that just give me a moment. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Not this one. This one. Yes. So now one issue, if you would have noticed, is that this particular table underscore box that we're looking at, right? So the particular table underscore box that we're looking at, it's basically going to consist of, all the information with respect to the entire thing over here, right? So it's basically consisting of all this information over here too. So we want to make sure that, we get the right information. Sorry, just too sensitive. Um, yeah, so sorry, my internet's really slow. Uh, yeah, so basically it consists of all this information over here, and we want to make sure that we get the right information, right? So for that, what we do is we just make sure that we just go through each and every link, okay? And basically, if you notice, first we're opening this particular thing that we had, okay? I mean, this particular links over here, we're opening that, and then we're making sure that we store all the valid links only, because this particular page is going to store links of it's going to store all the links present in that HTML, because we are saying find all over here, right? So we need only the specific links associated with it. So we just found a particular keyword called politician within a particular line. So if I find that keyword politician with respect to a particular line, that is when I add it to my links. Okay, so that I just create a new file with all the links, and that's how I get this particular set of links over here. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is because if you notice these URLs, so basically I'm just going through all the URLs available. I'm seeing if this particular politician exists in all the URLs, because anything else, so for example, if I, sorry about that again. Uh, yeah, so if I notice this particular link over here, I mean, this is also a link, right? I mean, this particular thing, the constituency, profession, all these things are links as well. But if you notice, I mean, it does not have that keyword politician as compared to other politicians' profiles. So if I go to a particular politician's profile, I notice that there is this thing called politician within that particular politician's profile. And these are links that I don't really care about. I don't want his constituency. I don't want which what's his profession, all of that, or her profession. I don't care about any of those things. All I care about is getting that particular politician's profile links. That is why in the code itself, I check for this keyword if politician is existing in the line. So basically, I'm just iterating through the file by opening the file, iterating through every line. And if a politician does not exist in that particular line or in that particular link, I continue. Else, I write the line in a new file called politicians underscore profiles.txt, which is the final file that I see because I'm removing this intermediary file called links.txt. So let me just comment this line out for the simplicity purposes. Let me run this again so you'll get a better understanding of things. So over here, if you notice, we have a lot of links, and it's not just the politicians aspect. So we have assembly underscore constituency, we have profession, we have, all the three things that we looked at: the profession, the assembly or the constituency they're from, and the politician's profile itself, right? But all that matters is only the politician profile for us and not any other links. So that is why what we're doing is we are simplifying our thing by adding this particular criteria over here. That's about it. Really simple over there. So that way we get all our politicians profiles. So now after we get all the politicians profiles, within the politician profile, okay, what I want to do is I want to get information about, I want to get their name, I want to get their phone number, and I want to get their email address, right? So this email address part is not, it's not text. So let's not worry much about that aspect right now. So let's just primarily focus on the phone number and the name. So I see that I have the name over here. I have the phone number over here. So let's just try to see where exactly is this particular name located. So let's inspect that particular element. So I notice that I have this name located within a header with the class name Jumbotron subhead. So what I do is so now I want to get the politician's data, right? Sorry about that. So I already have every politician's profile link, right? So now what I do is within that particular politician's profile link, I go to that particular politician's profile, check for his name, and check for the phone number and all of that. So the initial parts are just the same, getting the request and getting the soup. Okay, now the part over here that changes is the way we get the name. Okay, so basically what over here, since I've got the soup already, right? So I've said soup equal to beautiful soup of r.content, html.parser, right? So I say soup.find of class, soup.find a class whose name is Jumbotron subhead, because within my Jumbotron subhead part, within the class named Jumbotron subhead, I have the name of the politician. That's what we saw over here. Jumbotron subhead, I have the name of the politician, and that's exactly what I want. And we get that easily. So the name part is really simple, right? Now let's go back. So coming to the email part. The email part is really interesting because how exactly are we going to decipher a particular image, right? So because the emails are not text, they are text stored in an image. So we can't really extract information. So we can get the image itself, but we cannot get the text from that image directly using Beautiful Soup. Okay, so that's where the challenge lies. So for that, what we do is we use a few modules called PyTesseract, which basically acts as an OCR or an optical character reader. So it's like, it just reads the characters in a particular image. So we also use something called Pillow or PIL, and we import the image part and just feed an image object and all of that. And to feed an image object, we need to make sure that you import this. See, this is totally fine. You don't need to understand this part, even if it's going over your head. It's totally fine. because this is a little too advanced for the um, web scraping part. bec- uh, because usually you don't expect to get images and decipher images. So this just happens to be one of those places where we need to decipher images. So it's totally fine if it's going above your head, so don't worry about it. But I'll try to explain it to the best of my abilities over here. So first, what we're doing is within the emails, okay? So to find the emails, what we're going to do is we're going to find all the images within this particular soup, within the HTML content of that particular web page. So we're going to find all the image tags and we're going to store it in a list, okay? Now, what we're going to do is, so if you notice every image that's being displayed, so let's come back here. So this is an image, right? This not found part. So let's inspect it. How does an image look? So every image has something called an SRC or a source. Okay. So the source, or basically what it says is what image needs to be displayed over there. So over here, if you notice, it's a URL, which is very good for us. Because it's a URL, it makes things easier for us. So what we can do is we can go to that particular URL and get the email from there. But then obviously there are so many other images over here, right? So I have this particular person's image. I have various other images here and there. So I have a source over here. I have so many images over here. Various images. How do I exactly get this particular image over here, right? So one thing I can notice is that in this particular email ID's image, I have this email.php question mark, which lies within the SRC, right? So that is going to be my identifier for understanding, okay, fine, this is an image related to email addresses. So I find all the images within the soup, okay? And then what I do is within the string of the emails, or the SRC of the emails, if this email.php exists, I call that as my image link and I break my for a loop immediately. The reason I break my loop immediately is because I don't need to look for any other images. I already have an email image, right? Then I send another request to this particular image link. Which link? This particular link. So let's just get that particular link out. Let's see how it looks. So this is the link. So I go to this particular image link now. Okay, so I have this image over here. Okay, so it's a black background with a small image over here. So now to get the information out of that image from that, so I send a request to that particular link. Okay, and then so let's not look at this particular line for now. We'll come back to that. But then I send a request to that particular image. Okay, and then I use this module called PyTesseract. So PyTesseract is nothing but a module that helps us with optical character reading. Okay, it just helps you convert images to strings. If there's any string involved or any characters, it extracts the particular string of strings and the characters and displays it out to you. So we use PyTesseract for that. Within PyTesseract, you have this function called image to string. But then now the way we send an image through to this particular thing is not directly by just sending a URL. So you first need to make sure that you're sending a proper image, right? So for that, what we need to do is we need to convert the image content to bytes, and then we open that particular image, and that is why we use these two modules. Okay. The IO module and the pillow module, or the PIL module. We use this image and bytes IO we use those two classes. So first we have the image content. We convert that image to bytes using the bytes IO class present within the IO module. And then we pass the bytes of that particular image and open it using the image class present in the pillow module. Okay, it might be a little too complex, but it's fine if you're not getting it. If you're getting it, amazing. If you're not, it's not a huge deal, because trust me, there are very few cases where you're going to use something like this. Okay, so don't worry much about that. So yeah, we use this particular thing and we convert the email to a string. Okay, now, these things we'll come back to it later. Don't worry much about that. We'll come back to it later. But now let's come back to so that's how. So now what we through this particular code, let's assume that we get our uh, string, or we get the email IDs from the image. That's about it. So why we are using these parts, we'll come back to it in some time. Don't worry about it. But let's come back to getting the number. So if you notice, this particular number part is what I want now. So this number part is stored within a table whose class name is table underscore striped, space table underscore table hyphen bordered. So I want that particular table. I want, from that particular table, I want the phone numbers of that particular person. So what I do is I say soup dot find underscore all, and I mention the class name, exactly what was mentioned over there. Okay. So it finds all the classes with this particular class name. Now that I have my number, okay. Problem is that if you notice, this particular thing, right? The this particular table is the entire table that you see highlighted in blue over here. Okay. The number part is just one part of it, but there's so much other text that's available over here, right? So you have permanent address as text, you have the actual, the address part, then you have contact number as text, and then you have the contact number part, then you have email address as text, and then you have an image corresponding to the email address. Now the problem is that when I try to get the text from this entire table, I'm going to get all the text in this table, literally. But the only text I want is this particular number over here, right? So for that, what I do is, it's very simple. So in Python, you can split strings and all of that, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to do over here. So I say in my number, okay, so I take the text out of the number part and I split it at this string called number. So let's say, sorry, let's say I have a string called something like this, okay, and then I have something like number, and then I have okay, so this is a string that I have, some random string. Now I want to get this particular number over here only. So what I do is I'd say a dot split of. So let's assume that I have. Okay, so let's take a list instead to make things simpler. Let's just define another random string with something like this. So let's say that we have a list with 2 elements over here. Now I want to get the numbers of both these things over here. I want the numbers, and one thing I've noticed is this trend where I see that this particular number string is, I mean the substring number is present in both places. So what I do is I'd say for element in A, lm dot split of number. So if you notice, now that has given me, so it's split the 2 strings for me one after the other, okay, at this particular junction number. Okay, so that way what I'm able to do is I'm able to separate the number from all the previous text. Okay, but the problem over here is that we also have not just text before the numbers, but we also have some additional numbers and some additional text after that. So we want to make sure that we only get that particular number. So we know one thing, in India mobile numbers are 10 digits. It might be, I mean, I'm hoping it's the same in all other countries, but in case it's not, in India at least it's 10 digits, right? So since we know that, what I can do is I can just get the 10 digits after, right? After I split this particular number part. But for that, what I'd have to do, so now let's assume a list of this sort, okay? So some random text after that, or something like this. Now, when I say for lm in this thing and I split it at number, I've split it, but then I also have some text over here. Okay. And if you notice the split function, what it does is it splits every string into a list of substrings, right? So basically, if I remove this number part, this is one string that I have, this is one string that I have. That's what it does over here. Okay. Now we don't care about this particular part over here. We only care about this particular part over here. Sorry about that. So what we do is we so in Python you can index lists, and how you index lists is you know, the first element is 0 in a particular list, the second element is indexed as 1, the third element is indexed as 2, fourth element is indexed as 3, and so on. So over here, we will be indexing the second element. I mean, we will be getting the second element from the list, which will be indexed as 1. So now let's rerun the thing, but with a new criteria. So I say lm dot split of number, then I index it 1, and then I want only the first 10 characters, because if you notice, let's say this is a 10-digit mobile number. Okay, I want only those first 10 digits. So what I do is I only get the first 10 digits from there, okay, by using the 0:10. So it's basically, it's this is called slicing of strings or lists. So we just use it as, you know, something which helps us to get a particular number of characters only from a particular string, or only a particular number of elements from a particular list. So here we'll be dealing with strings. So when I do that, I get this. So it just makes things really simple. So what we're doing is we're just splitting the entire thing by number. Okay. And what we're doing is we are getting the first 10 values. And that's what we're doing over here. So we're splitting it by number. Then we're indexing 1, because within that, so once we split it, we get 2 elements in a list, but we don't care about this first element indexed at 0. We care about the second element indexed at 1, right? So for that, we index it by 1 over here. And again, in this element over here, we don't care about the entire text. We only want the phone number. And I know that the first 10 digits are going to be my first phone number involved. Even if there are more phone numbers, I don't care about that. I just want one phone number. Okay. So for that, what I do is I just say 0:10. So what it does is that it gives me the first 10 characters in this particular string over here, indexed at 1. And that's how I get my number over here. So it gets really simple over there to, you know, store the number. Yes, there is some, you know, you need to do some operations and things like that, but then it just makes things easier once you get the hang of it. So that's how you get the number. So we're pretty much done with the whole thing. The last part is that we need to write this particular things into a particular file. So for that, what I've done is I've just opened a file in write mode called the state name hyphen politicians.csv, within which I'm storing the name with a comma, uh, then the phone number with a comma, and then finally the email, just to, you know, have it as, you know, a CSV file kind of thing. So if you notice this particular file over here, I have a name, comma, phone number, comma, and this thing. So in case I don't have an email, I just say not found. Okay, because the reason it says not found is because that is exactly what is present in the image itself, right? When we're scanning the image through PyTestRact. Now we're pretty much done towards the end of it. Just one or two more minutes. So now the issue is that when you're using PyTestRact, a lot of times you might face a few errors here and there. Okay, because obviously so PyTestRact itself is built on a machine learning model. Okay, so it's just something that makes things simpler for us, but it's not really accurate all the time. The reason for that is because so here, let's just go back. This not found is fine. Let's just go back to some other politician. Okay, so within this particular thing over here, not this one. Let's just look at something that has a .com. like at the rate gmail.com or something like that. Yeah. So over here, look at this particular thing over here. So this particular com, it's an M, but it looks like an N, right? And the OCR is capable only of getting certain types. I mean, like getting text up to a certain accuracy, but then it's not so accurate to figure out that this is an M. Okay, so that's the reason. What happens is that sometimes we get junk text. Okay, and this particular if part is to just remove that junk text. So I know that sometimes n is being read as uh, m is being read as n. Okay, so I'm just checking if con is an email, and if it is, then what I do is sometimes also the gmail itself. So if this is a so this is a it says ref mail. Okay, this is m, but this looks like an n. Okay, so I know that this needs to be converted into an m. So I'm just, using a few cases over here, like, just trying to replace the n's with m's. I mean, and not all the n's need to be converted as m's. It's just at some places that I'm very confident about where I'm converting them, because you can't have a .con, but you can have a .com. It's not Gmail, it's Gmail, and it's not Rediff Nail, but it's Rediff Mail. So these are just three things, where I'm just doing some handling of the text. That's about it. There's not much to explain over there. It's just this one. It's just as simple as that. It's just make sure that we store the text in the right format, and we don't store incorrect information as much as possible. Obviously, even after this, there might be places where things are being read in the wrong format, but as long as we're trying to remove as many discrepancies as possible, it's fine. So you can come up with more such conditions over here, like if you notice that there are a few more things that you might have to edit, you can still go ahead with that. So we just store the email number and the name, and we store it in this file over here, and that marks the end of the web scraping part. That's how we do web scraping. I'm sure this must have been a little taxing as compared to the API part. And that's why I said, I mean, it's always better to find an API to get your data rather than working on web scraping. But web scraping is definitely fun. Once you get a hang of it, it just makes things very interesting and really fun to work with. So that kind of concludes the web scraping part as well, whatever I wanted to cover in web scraping. So yeah, that's pretty much it from my end. So I'll be happy to take up any questions that you people might have now. So in case you have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the live chat, and I'll answer them for you. In case you have no questions, can you please mention a no in the chat section so that I know that you people have no questions? Because as far as I can see, I think I've answered all the questions so far. So in case you have any further questions, please put forward those questions. And in case you have no further questions, please mention a no in the chat section. I mean, I see. Okay, so Sachin. Okay, yes, definitely. I mean, that's one concern that a lot of people have. But see, the thing about web scraping is that you can do it on websites that are not well known. Like for example, like obviously doing web scraping on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all, you can't do it because they'll block you after a point. So if you're looking at scraping websites like the one I just showed you, like nocorruption.in and things like that, those are slightly lesser known websites. So first of all, they will allow you to scrape it. Obviously, I mean that's not an issue, but the ethical aspect of it, it's always up for debate. Okay, so it's fine to scrape the website, but just make sure sometimes you just go through the uh, legal policies if you wish. Most websites, they don't really have anything against automation tools, but if some does have more thing about automation tools, then I mean, if they have some information mentioned about automation tools, then it's better not to use web scraping. So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest scraping websites like LinkedIn or Facebook, Twitter. Anyway, you have APIs for them. But other websites like the one we just saw and lesser known websites, I mean, it's fine if you don't see any terms of use or terms and conditions and all of that. You can use it. So just make sure that um, yeah, you just make sure that you go through the terms and conditions once before doing the web scraping part. So yeah, I mean, if they don't allow it, definitely it is going to be illegal. So okay, so the next one. See, Shaunak, I mean, having 2 hours, we cannot, make sure that you also do a task along with us, right? I mean, you can always, recreate the code that I'm doing. I mean, that I'm explaining, right? But it's practically not possible to, make sure that we have a complete hands-on session within the 2 hours. So I think going through projects itself kind of gives you that feel of hands-on. But if it's not, then I mean, feel free to just mimic the codes that are there. That itself should give you some exposure and understanding of things. So yeah, I mean, that's it's just that we have a time constraint, right? And it's obviously necessary for me to make sure that I'm delivering the content that's necessary to be covered on that particular day. But definitely, I'll see, if I can make things more interactive, if I can, have a more hands-on approach. But probably from tomorrow, what you could do is you could just implement things on the go as I'm explaining it. So, you could probably watch the session on your phone, and you could have the laptop open and, write the codes out there as I'm explaining it. So that might make it more convenient for you as well. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, we will also definitely be giving some tasks. It's just that for today there is no task. I mean, in the future, tomorrow and day after and all of that, yes, we will have a couple of tasks here and there which we give forward. But for today's session, there is no particular task. However, if you're really interested, what you could do is you could try to scrape this particular website again on your own. Probably it'll just help you recollect the concepts as well. So yeah, I mean, that's something you could definitely do. But for today, as such, we do not have a particular task. But from tomorrow onwards, yes, there will be tasks after the session which you'll have to do. Will you do a hands-on web scraping session with us? I think I just explained that whole aspect. So I mean, yeah, it's just that we don't have a lot of time, right? So it's a 2 hour session. We need to make sure that we cover the content, and in 2 hours, having a complete hands-on session might not be really feasible to perform as well. So yeah, that's something. But definitely, I mean, I'll look into how to make it more hands-on from tomorrow. Uh, Okay, so Priyansh, the codes for all the sessions will be shared together at once. And if you registered for the workshop, then yes, you will be getting the codes towards the end of the workshop. So once the workshop is done, after the 5 days, we will be sharing material of which codes are also part of. So you'll get the codes as well. So we'll be sharing it after the workshops. Shaunak, okay, so I do understand. So that is why I was mentioning that, as I'm explaining the code, if you can probably watch the session through your phone and probably recreate the code as I'm explaining it on your system or the laptop, that would make things easier for you as well. So, I mean, I do understand it's going out of, slightly above your head, but yeah, I mean, don't worry about it. So from tomorrow onwards, I'm pretty sure it won't. See, web scraping is just a very dry thing, to be very honest. And many people are just going to find it a little difficult to grasp. And in fact, I still do. I mean, I still find it difficult to grasp sometimes. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, if so, that's basically the thing over there. So if I mean, it'll just make things easier for you if you recreate the code itself. Okay. Okay. The reason why we don't share the code immediately after, I mean, like, during or after the workshop is because we see that, a lot of people, once they get the code, they don't really attend the sessions, and we don't want that to happen. But I mean, sure. If since I've seen, like, a couple of you asked for codes, so I think, I can share the codes. That shouldn't be an issue. So what I'll do is I will. I mean, the thing is that a lot of these codes are related, and we'll be using a lot of these related concepts. So I'll actually start modularizing the codes, and I'll start sending them, on a daily basis, just to make things easier for you people. If that helps, sure, I can do that. So I'll send the codes for this particular data collection, the web scraping part, and the API data collection part by tomorrow morning. So I'll just make sure that I modularize everything and send it through. Okay. So any other questions? Anyone? So if you have any other questions, please mention the questions in the chat section. And in case you don't, then please mention a no so that I know you have no questions. You're welcome, Sachin. Shaunak, yeah, I mean, if all you'll have to do is you'll have to install the respective modules with respect, I mean, all the libraries that are a part of the code, and you'll be able to run them in Jupyter Notebooks. Okay, perfect. You're welcome, Zaw. Cool then. So I so if it'd be great if everyone could mention a no if they have no further questions. Priyansh, yeah, I mentioned that, right? So I'll be sharing the codes of everyday sessions from tomorrow onwards. I mean, today's codes, I'll share it by tomorrow morning, and from tomorrow onwards, I'll make sure that you get access to it on a regular basis. I'll share it via emails only, so don't worry about that. You'll receive an email by tomorrow morning with the codes that we used today, so you can just explore and work around the codes. Okay, so you're welcome. You're welcome, Priyansh. Cool then. So I guess that's pretty much about it. So in case you people have no further questions, then we can wind up the session. And thank you so much, people. Thank you so much for joining today. Tomorrow we'll be dealing with some interesting stuff, which is more data science related for sure. Today was definitely a little dry, but it's really important to know how to create your own data sets. Tomorrow we'll be dealing with exploratory data analysis, just a basic part of it, and it's going to be really interesting though because we will be dealing with a few aspects of plotting, few aspects of certain other analysis over there with respect to data. So make sure that you attend tomorrow's session, and in case you want to view this session again, you can use the same YouTube link to view the session. This is going to stay here for a while. So yeah, I mean, feel free to just go through the session whenever you feel like by using the same link that's available. That's pretty much it from my end, people. Thank you so much for joining the session today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Good night. Bye bye.